Hello, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me at this conference. Very excited to be here. I wanted to, so I'll just give a mini introduction of who I am. I've run global brands around the world for over 20 years, lived on 4 continents, North America, South America, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, and work in several countries in Europe as well. And realized how difficult really multicultural environments can be, and yet when well managed, how exponentially performing they can be as well. And so I embarked on a PhD to understand how people who have different backgrounds really manage collaborations in the workplace. And so I published a book called Don't Mess With My Professionalism, which gives a framework on how to ace basically intercultural conflict. And today I would like to talk about the journey that we are embarking on, all of us, from accidental excluders to deliberate includers. So I would like any of you to think of a moment where, for any kind of reason, you felt that you didn't belong or you were literally excluded. So you hadn't watched the film and therefore you couldn't understand the joke, or you didn't speak the language and therefore you couldn't understand the people around you. Maybe you were too short, too tall, too heavy, too light, too white, too black, too Asian, too married, too much of a parent, or not having children. All these are moments that you might have experienced. And when they hit us, they're rather unpleasant, and they have actually drastic consequences in the workplace. Cognitively, we get impaired. We have an increased sense of this is never going to happen, self-defeating kind of behavior, less chances to collaborate. Our pro-social behaviors are reduced. Have maybe a tendency for not resisting to temptation as much, not finding motivation, purpose to what we do, and possibly feeling unwell. So this is really something that as leaders, we should avoid at all costs for ourselves, but also for the people surrounding us, because for the business, it's not good at all. And I would like to just clarify or remind ourselves of what diversity really is, and what including really is. And it's important that we all realize that diversity, it's about our individual differences. And I know lots of people talk about gender equality, a lot of people talk about ethnicity, the LGBT movement, etc. And yes, that's correct. That's part of the spectrum, but the spectrum is way broader. It's about diversity that is visible, that is invisible. And here I would add, beyond the gender orientation or sexual orientation, things related to disability, to neurodiversity, to social status at times, to family status, to political views. So that this is all the invisible part. And then there's the acquired ones, which are some of these as well, right? We can be newly rich or newly poor. We can be a newly parent, newlywed. And basically, there's those 3 buckets. But importantly, we should just remind ourselves that it's all about each and any one of us. Vanessa Barros, I am French Portuguese. I might have my choices in life, and I'm going to be very different from anybody I will be working with, even if we very much look alike. This is the first point that I wanted to really make sure comes across, is that we should open the spectrum and understand that it's about any kind of difference. Okay. And the second thing is that everybody talks about diversity, inclusion. What's the difference between the two? The diversity is that combination, the full potential of this collective intelligence made up of all the parts. The inclusion is really how comfortable, how a sense of belonging that we will have. And so, you know, the images that are often given are diversity is inviting very different people around the table, and inclusion is inviting them to talk around the table for dinner, or inviting everybody to a party, but everybody having a choice and a chance to dance and not to feel awkward in the way they dance. So this is really for the definitions. And the reason, and why is it so difficult, and why am I talking about a journey that we are embracing, and possibly one of the journeys that is the most extraordinary as a society of all times? Because we are embarking on a journey that is completely antagonistic to how we were programmed as human beings in the first place. Why is that? Because in order to survive, everything to do with diversity and inclusion are things that we don't like to do. And that's because we were programmed thousands of years ago when there were tigers around the corner in the jungle, and we needed to perceive things in a very binary way. Dangerous, not dangerous. Same, therefore safe. Different, therefore dangerous. Shortcuts, stripes, tiger. And we don't have time in this narrative brain, which it is called, to lose the candor and to lose the bias that we are made with. Okay. And it's only when we start playing only with our senses, but in a senses without the interpretation of those senses, just in observation mode, which is the experience brain, that we really go through life with the senses, without the judgments, without all the fast conclusions that therefore make it very difficult for us to accept the diversity. So the second point I want to make come across after the notion that diversity is such a wide spectrum and that inclusion is a way to embrace that diversity and manage it, is the fact that it's not an easy game for any of us. And so we are embarking on a journey where things are not going to be easy. Our brains are trained to walk towards or run away. We are much slower at getting closer to people, getting into positive energies than we are at actually being negative, aggressive. We have cognitive overloads, and there's so much we can take. And even diversity becomes one, because we need to adapt, because we need to feel safe. And if we are playing double agent because we can't be fully ourselves in the work environment, we're going to have something called emotional tax. There's going to be another load, and that load is going to reduce our thinking. We learn through patterns. So anything, all the stereotypes, all the biases are the way we learn. Prejudice is hardwired in our brains. And we have a tendency to see the norm through the world through our norms. So we have that notion where when we're the majority, we have this syndrome where my norm should be the norm, right? My life is the life. So imagine that I am heterosexual and I go to a kindergarten and I see two men bringing a baby. I'll be, oh, that must be the dad and the uncle. I might not automatically think, because it's not ingrained in my memory and it's not my norm, because I come from a different majority, that this could be a gay couple bringing their child to the kindergarten. So we have a tendency to impose, and historically that's where we've done best. We've killed without much concern people from different religions, from people who hide maybe new news, like telling us that the earth was no longer flat, but maybe round. We have a tendency, we excluded very easily by creating psychiatric hospitals, dissonant women in the 1900s. So that is what we do at our best as a society. We exclude anybody that is not the norm. And the norm is a statistical curve. So anybody who's not at the very top of that curve is the outsider and therefore is dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Because it is questioning our belief. If there's a second religion, that means there's another God. Am I wrong in believing in my God if somebody else believes in another God? If I have someone who's divorced and I'm married, that's dangerous because that means that, oh, so the vows of a long time can be actually questioned, that institution can actually be questioned. This is all aggression, right? As a perception that we have. And so that's the big danger, is to impose our norm to the others. When we are in the minority, and let's remember that we go from one to the other quite often. Now, some of us are a lot safer, a lot more comfortable, and are probably belonging to a majority much more often than not. Or even if they are from a certain minority, such as, for instance, the richest people, that's not such an uncomfortable minority to be in compared to other minorities, right? So, but what is important is to know that we go from one to the other, and we've all been isolated in a space where we felt we did not belong. And there is also a pattern of thinking when we are the only one different from everybody else, which is to try to figure out, are they going to accept me? Am I right here? Should I express myself in a louder way so that I exist? Am I being understood? And that is also creating some difficulties. So between the majority and the minority, and the fact that we switch backwards and forwards between those two, we also need to, and this is all derived from the narrative brain. So our brain is the main barrier against exclusion, and that's the one that makes us be accidentally excluders. By having a stereotype when we see a scene, by interpreting a behavior and immediately putting a personality trait on it, rather than think, maybe they did this because there was something wrong in the environment. Maybe their weird behavior is not so weird at all. But we have this tendency to just come to fast conclusions. And so in order to be able to include deliberately, we need to play with this other brain. And that's our strongest ally. So that is what we do, and that's what we specialize in at Leadership CQs, to really create practices for individuals to tame that experience brain. So I'll give you a little bit of a snapshot of some of the things that we can work on. The first one would be about humble inquiry. Most of the times when we ask questions, we have already an answer behind our heads, or we have a judgment. Why did you do that? I was wrong. Or how come there's a delay in delivery? What happened with the customs? So we think it's the customs and we push the person into that direction. How are you doing and how are the kids? We're pushing for the person to talk to us about their kids. Maybe they wanted to talk to us about something else. So opening up our questions and making them as broad and as non-directive as possible and non-judgmental as possible is a great exercise to play with. So try to notice in the coming days the number of questions that are not real questions, that are actually assertions made into questions, okay? And try to train yourself to say, for instance, how's it going? Rather than what's happening with your job, or how is, what's going on? And let the people just go in the direction that they want to. If they say they went to the movies, let them talk. Maybe they want to talk about who they went to the movies with. Maybe they want to talk about the movie itself. We don't know. The second one is really the notion of observation, and making sure that when you look at the world, you need to realize that you're going to look at the world through the filter of your own habits, what you know, what your culture is. And therefore, it's very important that you just stick to what you see. And observation, it's Tom, Angela, anybody in the room not being able to say anything different from what I'm saying. So if I look at this chart, and if I start saying this is a presentation chart, it's already an interpretation. But if I'm saying this is a square or a rectangular with a gray background, there's a title at the top, there's letters at the top, because even a title would be an interpretation, then nobody can question. That's what observation is. And we need to do that as much as we can in our workplace to avoid judgment and wrong interpretations. Perspective taking all the time, putting ourselves in other people's shoes, particularly when we feel tension towards them, when we feel that we kind of dislike, that we don't understand. What are they thinking in return? When we think that somebody's unprofessional, do they really think that we're super professional in return? Maybe not. And finally, the emotional awareness, which is really this ability to know how you're feeling every morning, every evening, and to realize that how you feel is going to be the way the day is going to be for you. Guess what? If I'm sad that it's raining, it's not because rain is sad. I know people who love rain. If I'm sad, it's because I'm sad in the first place, and I'm not able to take the rain as something positive or neutral, at least. Inclusion also goes with having some automatisms and reflexes that are really important. Let's try to call people by how they want to be called. There's some languages in the world where there's a difference between very formal and informal ways of calling people. So that's one. Do you need titles? What gender orientation is this person? And to really ask very kindly, how may I address you? And then make sure that we pronounce their names correctly and their last names correctly. Because otherwise it can end up being a microaggression to be the one that everybody misspells or mispronounces their names. Okay, so let's have that courtesy towards people and calling them by what they want to be called. Let's not talk about differences when they don't matter. Oh, there was a thief, he was white. Wolf. Does it matter? Unless the police says we need a robot and we need to know how to recognize that person. But otherwise, oh, they have a child, it's adopted. Or oh, it's Katya, she's got dyslexia. Oh, this is going to be your new boss, he's gay, but we don't talk about it. Well, then why are you talking about it? Or female executive. What's the difference? What does that do to us, the fact that she's female or not? So it's really important that the differences are mentioned when they really matter, and then we can value them, and then we can explore them. But often when we point out at a difference in a way that is not totally necessary, it's that it's a taboo. It's something that it's like sandpaper, something that bothers us a little bit, or is unusual, you know, adopted child. Wow, very unusual. So why are we going to respect the differences? And there's little things about respect. We want to exist as individuals. We want to know that we belong. Do we have in our canteens the foods that would allow anybody to feel absolutely at home in their food habits? You know, there are big companies that really do that. You have kosher, you have halal, you have vegan, you have all the types of different allergenics are very clearly also labeled, etc. So it's really, really important to start with the little details. Let's think about the pyramid, the Maslow pyramid, and see what are the basic needs. Well, food is one of them, right? Or make sure that the entrance is open to all, and you don't have to go backwards to get into with a wheelchair. It's like respecting by people having the ability to be who they are, exactly like you are. Empower differences. So that's the ability to play with the collective intelligence, and maybe not always do the perfect casting when we're working, and maybe we rotate the roles so that everybody has a chance to grow into different types of skills. And finally find, and that's the big role of a leader compared to a manager, right? The leader knows what to do and shows the way, and by having that vision, create a solidarity around it. And maybe let's look at what we're alike and how we are alike and what we have in common, rather than just look for our differences. So I just wanted to finish this little mini introduction with a few ideas to start the journey. What about creating an inclusive calendar and ensuring that you ask your team, what are the important dates for them? Is there a special wedding anniversary? Is there a birthday that is super important? Is there a religious, cultural event that they are going to be absent for? And therefore, let's not do the executive committee that day, or the big meeting, or the big briefing meeting that day. Keep diary of your emotional state if you want to really practice your emotional awareness. Practice the humble inquiry. And note when the questions asked around you are not actually candid, they have an agenda behind. Systematically put yourself in other people's shoes and look at the situation from their angle. And what fundamental need violation have they experienced? Have they been respected as individuals? Has their work been respected? That's very important. And then think of the stereotypes that you may have about people that are not like you. Get to know the stereotypes that you commonly have, discover when new come up, and if you make mistakes and you accidentally exclude, be candid and humble to apologize if you've caused harm, and to learn from that. And that's, I think, where I want to leave you all is the fact that we are in a world where we're all engaged in a journey. We're very different from one another. And so some of us are very used to talking or behaving or collaborating or working or even cohabitating with diverse individuals. Some others no. And so we can't blame people for not having been brought up in diverse environments and for not understanding it's a journey, and we all need to be accepting of each other and help each other go there. That's it for now. So if we want to spend the last few minutes on sharing some questions that you might have. We believe that the change is really a matter of at least, it's not we believe, science shows that you need 3 months for the brain to get to new habits. So any kind of intervention that we have, we make sure that we have a follow-up throughout 12 weeks with challenges, weekly challenges, so that the practices come into people's habits and workspaces. I'll leave to the room if there's any questions or comments or experiences that you've had of accidental inclusion or thank you, Angela. Some people wonder if they are, white, 40, male, and the top of their game. They wonder whether they are legitimate to talk about diversity and inclusion. And I would say that absolutely everyone, and particularly the members of majorities, are very, very, very legitimate to talk about diversity and inclusion, because in organizations it is shown that unless the top of the pyramid and the top of the leadership is engaged in that journey and walks the talk rather than just using it as a label, then it is something that is going to be effective with the organization, where it's going to be institutionalized. When we work with companies who have volunteer D&I members, that's different from assigning people with those roles, giving them recognition for those roles, paying them for those roles, including the soft skill of cultural intelligence within the selection process, within the reward process, these are things that can be done by all of us to make it sustainable. Otherwise, you run the danger that a CEO who's very committed sets that tone and everybody embraces it, and then there's a new CEO, and because it's not being institutionalized, it's not within the practices of the organization, you lose all the things that you gained in the first place. So that's something that I would point out. And let's be accepting of others' mistakes. Let's look at, I had this example of this leader who hired a woman who was missing an arm, and and she had a very social role because she was in marketing. So that's usually it's professions where you are quite public at times. So he was definitely deliberately being inclusive in the way he was hiring, in the way he was leading. And first or second exco, he calls me absolutely devastated because it made a boo-boo, and he suddenly had this expression, it's going to cost us an arm and a leg. And this woman was present, and he was absolutely devastated. Now, is it worth that he made that mistake that maybe she didn't even realize? So he had to double check after the effect, and not in front of everybody, but just, is it worse that he did that mistake once that he probably will never do again, or that he just actually hired her and made that gesture, that walking the talk of getting her on board? So I think we need to be very, very accepting, and that may be the final words that I would have for you today. Is this acceptance and the fact that we are at very different stages of this journey, and let's be collaborative, let's be into a positive demeanor, all of us, and educate each other by being curious, by being empathetic with each other, and yes, and thinking of each other as different individuals rather than victims or oppressors, or because in the workplace a lot of people are doing what they think is right, and so we need to help them do what is right if what they think is right is not yet quite right. Thank you very much.